Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar about back to school and online safety. It's great to see so many of you joining us today. We'll get started in just a moment because there may just be some people joining us a little bit late, and that's understandable at the start of a new year when everyone's very busy. Please do be aware that we are recording this webinar for the benefit of colleagues who can't join us live at the moment, and the recording will be available shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. But do keep that in mind, is that you are being recorded. So obviously all the mics and the cameras are turned off for your convenience and privacy. But please do feel free to type things into the chat if you have any questions or you want any further information. Myself and my colleagues will be putting things into the chat as we go through, some useful links and other details as well. But please do feel free to ask any questions. And be prepared to get a little bit involved a little bit later on in the webinar as well, because I have got a Mentimeter that I'd love you to join in and share your thoughts and ideas too. So I think what we'll do is one or two people still entering, but we'll get started. So we start on time and we finish on time, and people will join us as we go. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Gareth Cort. I am part of the digital citizenship team here at European Schoolnet. You may have joined some of our webinars in the past over the last year or so, where we've been exploring a number of different online safety topics. We've covered things such as generative AI. We've talked about fake news. We've talked about VR and virtual worlds. And this time around, as it's the start of a new school year, we thought it was very timely to talk about back to school and all the fun and the excitement that comes with that, but what you can be considering around online safety for the new school year, both for your students and for yourself, and indeed others in your school community as well. So we're going to be going through a whole number of different things throughout the course of this session, lots of information and advice to give you, some useful links to resources and other things that may be useful too. But as I said, if you do have any questions or any thoughts, please do feel free to share them in the chat, and myself or one of my colleagues will spot them. Apologies if I keep kind of doing this. I've got two screens set up so I can keep an eye on the chat as well as an eye on my slides. But hopefully that won't be too off-putting. So before we dive into what you need to consider at the start of a brand new school year, well worth just going over something that we go over at the start of each one of these webinars, but very good to refresh your memory. And that is around our teacher corner that is available on the Better Internet for Kids portal. We've been running this for over a year now, and if you are already familiar with it, great. If you haven't come across it before, then please do go and explore it after this webinar. It is, as you can see on the screen, a one-stop shop for learning and teaching all about digital citizenship, media literacy, and online safety. And it has a wealth of information and advice, as well as signposting to good, high-quality educational resources that you can use to support your learners and others in your school community. It's also an opportunity for us to highlight other initiatives that we're working on as the digital citizenship team. So there's a really fantastic handbook on there available in lots of different languages around the digital, what's it called? The DSA. I've completely forgotten what DSA stands for. It'll come back to me in a second there. Colleagues in the chat, if you could just remind me, because my mind has gone for a complete blank there, which is terrible. But the DSA, which is Digital Services Act. Thank you. Sorry, there we go. The Digital Services Act, which has a number of implications for online safety for children and young people. So there's a great handbook for it on there, and it's also a great place to signpost to a number of different MOOCs that we run. And more on MOOCs a little bit later in this webinar. It's broken up into two main sections that may be of interest to you. The first one are a number of introductory modules that we recommend that all teachers work their way through, and they are completely self-directed, that they're provided as information and to refer to as you wish. And you can see that they cover the four topics that are listed on the slide here. Children's rights in a digital world, key online safety risks, approaches to teaching online safety and related topics, and the importance of developing a whole school approach. And you can work through these modules yourself, as I said, self-directed. They have lots of links and signposting and a number of pencil and paper activities that you can work through to help you consider key learning and thinking in this area. So those are fairly static and can be referred to at any time, but the bit that's a bit more dynamic are the corresponding deep dive modules that we're adding to on a monthly basis. And as you can see, we've built up quite a collection here, ranging from things such as cyberbullying to disinformation to deepfakes to generative AI to safer social media use, and indeed the back to school and online safety deep dive that reflects many of the things that are covered in this webinar webinar is already live in the deep dive section on the Teacher Corner. So there are a wealth of different topics that you can dip into. You may not necessarily need to work through every single one of these if you already know about some of them. But if you want to upskill yourself and develop your knowledge, then those materials are there for you whenever you need them as well. We will continue to add to those on a monthly basis. We do also have a forthcoming Parents Corner that's going to mirror a number of these topics. More about that towards the end of the webinar, but useful to keep in mind. So do check out the Teacher Corner after this webinar if you need to find some more information. So we're going to turn our attention though to this brand new school year. Hopefully you've had a good start to it, whether it is returning and working with learners who you've known for some time or a long time. Maybe it's welcoming a brand new class into your fold of a whole new group of young people or children that you're going to be working with for the first time. It could be that you are a long-term educator who has worked in a number of schools. Maybe you've spent a long time in one particular school and you're looking forward to the new challenges of a new school year. It could be that you are brand new to the profession, fresh out of education and raring to go and making a difference in the educational world. Regardless of your experience and regardless of the type of school that you work in, be it primary, be it secondary, be it even in further education or another type of education setting, it's really important to take opportunities to think about how you can protect and safeguard your learners online and empower them to look after themselves and each other as well. And what better time to do that than at the start of a new school year when everyone's feeling refreshed and enthusiastic, when you're setting expectations and rules and establishing new routines. This is the perfect time to explore many of these different things, which makes perfect sense to have this webinar right now. So we're going to be covering 3 different sections throughout the course of this webinar. We're going to be thinking, of course, about how you can support your learners, whatever age they might be. We're going to be thinking about what you need to consider as an educator in this space, thinking really carefully about protecting your reputation and indeed the school's reputation, but also how you work with technology and the internet as part of your role as well. And last but not least, of course, thinking really carefully about how we can work with others in the school community, parents, carers, families, those who can have an impact on the safety and well-being of children online too. So I'm going to spin off into each of these sections. I've got a number of different examples and a few links that will come along the way as well. So we're going to start with obviously the most important one, how we can support our learners online. And I've got a number of different points that you can see on the screen here. So I'll cover the first 2, and then any of the points in the list that you can see in different colours are ones that I'm going to spin out into, and I've got some additional slides and information for each of these ones. As I mentioned, do feel free to ask any questions or pop anything into the chat as we go. One of the most important aspects of supporting your learners is to use your school, your classroom as a safe space to be able to talk about online safety. We know that children and young people at different ages may turn to different people to talk about their experiences, both online and offline. And if you work with older learners, particularly those in their teenage years, you're probably fully prepared for the fact that they may not turn to you when they have issues. They're probably more likely to turn to a best friend or maybe a parent or carer. Regardless of that, though, taking opportunity to make a safe space in your classroom or where you educate is a really great opportunity to open up discussions about online safety. Making a safe space isn't easy. It takes time. It takes building trust, but it also takes setting clear expectations. So it's really important to establish that people are able to share their views. It may well be when you come to some online safety topics that you have to talk about some things that might be quite controversial, or people may have very strong opinions or beliefs about, and a safe space allows people to share those without judgment or fear of ridicule or coming into conflict. So it's really important to take some steps to make that kind of safe space. You need to set boundaries and expectations around confidentiality. And it's really important for your learners to understand that you can't promise confidentiality, even in these safe spaces. If someone discloses something that presents a risk to themselves or risk to other young people, then of course you have an obligation as an educator to pass those concerns along in order to get them help and support. It is a child protection or safeguarding concern. So you need to make these expectations really, really clear. And one way that you can go about that is actually In the same way as you may already be doing in your classroom for the new school year, you may be setting up various rules about what's okay to do and how people behave and how people treat each other. Is think about ways that you can incorporate those rules into building this safe space, but also rules extending into the use of technology and the internet in your classroom. And that can be a great way not only to set some expectations around general behavior around technology and the internet, but also set some expectations around, positive use of the internet and a great opportunity to role model positive use of the internet as well. So safe spaces and classroom rules kind of go hand in hand, but taking the time to develop those things, particularly with a new group of learners who maybe you don't know very well yet, you're just building those relationships for the first time, is laying the groundwork really for all the things that I'm going to talk about in the rest of this section. So the first of these is the ability to talk about online experiences. And it is really, really important to have these types of discussions. It's impossible now to tease apart online life and offline life in the lives of many children and young people. And in fact, if you talk to them about it, or you ask them about things that are online and things that are offline, even they find it harder to make a distinction now because the lines have very much been blurred with things such as popular apps and games and social media, in the way that news breaks and is reported around the world now. The internet is a fundamental part of day-to-day life and day-to-day experiences. In your classroom, depending on what you teach and how you teach it, you may well use a number of different online platforms and services to facilitate that education. So, even the education itself and the work that you do in schools is not siloed away from using online and using the internet. It's woven in, and that is very much the life of children and young people today. So in the same way as we want to discuss with children their lives in general in order to support them and help them understand it better, we need to talk about the online aspect of those as well. And there's a number of different approaches. Depending on the age of the learners that you work with, if they're younger ones, they'll probably fall over themselves to tell you about their favorite game or their favorite app or this funny video they saw on YouTube or TikTok. So you've often got a very easy in to talk about things that are topical or trending or interesting to them. For older ones, it might be a little bit harder. Sometimes you structure those discussions a little bit more, and some of the points on the screen here can really help with that. Sometimes one of the easiest ways in is to look at what's happening in the world around us. It could be local news stories, could be national news stories, could be international news stories. But by and large, not a day goes by that there isn't something happening in the world somewhere where the internet is playing a part, either positive or negative. And looking for those examples can be a great way of engaging in discussion with your learners because it takes the personal out of the discussion rather than having to talk about their personal experiences or feelings, rather than sometimes having to worry about how that might lead to a large number of disclosures or to a really difficult conversation that maybe they're not prepared for. Sometimes focusing on a news story is a way of compartmentalizing that. You can talk about the events that have happened that have been reported, who's involved, what actions did they take, what mistakes did they make, what could they have done better. If they've made a really big mistake or if they've done something wrong and it's affected other people, how do they make amends? How do they apologize? How should other people accept that apology? How long should people hold them accountable for their behavior? It throws open a whole number of different things that you can explore depending on the story. If you haven't got any news stories to draw from, you can turn to other forms of media as well. TV shows, films, soap operas in many countries have got storylines that are related to aspects of online experiences and behaviors as well. Particularly when you might want to talk about a difficult topic like cyberbullying, or with older ones talking about something like sexting. Sometimes turning to those types of shows or films is the way to go as well, because again, you're no longer having to talk about personal experiences, you're talking about the experiences of the characters, and you can talk about the characters' actions and behaviors and feelings. So finding ways in is really important, and media provides many opportunities to do that. Once you're in, it's also about finding ways to ask challenging questions. Sometimes children and young people, particularly if they've had a lot of online safety education, are very good at giving you the answers that they think you want to hear. So I'll give you a classic example of we'd never talk to strangers online, which in 2024 is a little bit misleading because actually there are plenty of games and apps where throughout no fault of your own, you're thrown into an environment of people you don't know, and you do end up communicating with strangers to some extent. So it's really important sometimes to ask more probing questions or ask bigger questions. And I've seen schools in the past use a question of the week or question of the day. It could be with a class or particular age of students, or indeed across the whole school. Some schools have adopted the approach of this is our big question for the week. What do you think the long-term impact of AI is going to be on people's health or people's well-being? And you can explore it as a school. And it allows the opportunity to explore it at different levels as well. So if you adopt a big question as a school, even the youngest learners in your school can look at it through their experiences and their understanding. And of course, the eldest learners in the school may have a very different take on it, but it gives you an opportunity to compare and contrast. And the important thing to understand about big questions is that sadly, sometimes there are no big answers. There's no conclusive way of answering that question or coming to a conclusion that meets everyone's needs. But it's the thinking process around it and the discussions that tip out of that that are often very, very beneficial. Another way that you can explore that as well is this whole idea of what if questions. And sometimes this is the best way of testing whether or not children who just pout back answers about online safety really do understand what they're talking about. You could say, what if your best friend's being bullied on social media? What if you see someone receiving hate speech in an online game? What if you notice this happening? What if you notice that happening? And sometimes asking those what if questions gives a great opportunity for children to explore the different strategies that they would use to respond to tricky or difficult situations online, both ones that might be happening to themselves or ones that they might observe happening to other people as well. And it gives you loads of opportunities to talk about things like managing personal information, understanding safety tools on social media and games, such as report buttons, block buttons, privacy settings, and other aspects of behavior that you can use in different situations. And again, there's no one right answer. In your class or your group of learners, you may get a number of different responses. Context is key as well. You can change the scenario. You say, okay, rather than it being your best friend being bullied on social media, what if it was someone that you've never met before and you see them receiving really hateful messages? What do you do differently? What do you do the same? So those what if questions are a great way of exploring lots and lots of different concepts around online experiences. And as I mentioned earlier, if you've got younger ones that you teach, they tend to fall over themselves to tell you about their favorite things and the things that are trending. But one great way that you can explore it is this whole idea of digital footprints. What is the approach that they take online to exploring things, to trying things out, what things really kind of form the basis of their online experiences. And a really nice activity that I've used for many years with learners, young and old, is to just take a simple piece of paper. You can make it up into a worksheet if you want, but you just need an outline of a footprint, like I've got on the screen here. And you just give them 10, 15 minutes. They can chat with a friend or work with someone else if they want to. And you get them to fill that footprint with all their favorite things online. Could be their favorite influencers on TikTok or YouTube. Could be the latest best game that they're playing on their Xbox or their PlayStation. Could be the favorite game they play when they've got 5 minutes on their smartphone or their tablet. But you get them to completely fill that footprint with as many different things and experiences as they can think of, and then you've got the opportunity to share those. And it's a great way of establishing where there might be trends going on in your classroom. So if a number of learners all love playing a certain game on Roblox, you now know that when you didn't before. It gives the opportunity for people to discover new things that maybe they didn't know about. And it helps inform you as an educator about what your students love to do online, which sometimes makes these conversations easier as well. You can even do it yourself as an educator. You could do your own digital footprint and then contrast it with theirs to show how adults and children may use the internet in very different ways. So loads and loads of opportunities to talk about online experiences. Once you've done that, of course, you've got the opportunity to try and identify where their needs are in terms of gaps in their knowledge and understanding, things that they find tricky to grasp, and things that they really need to understand in order to look after themselves and others online. And of course, there's a number of different ways that you can go about that. You can share surveys and questionnaires. You can ask them directly. Do bear in mind, though, and I'm sure you're already aware of this, if you have any teaching experiences, of course, you can give a child a survey, but you can't guarantee that a child answers a survey or a questionnaire truthfully, particularly if you're asking some slightly harder questions, such as whether or not they've experienced anything that upsets them or worries them online. They may not always be truthful or give you all the details. But again, as a bit of a finger in the wind approach of just trying to understand a bit about your learners, that can sometimes be a quick and easy way in. And the best way of doing those is often to balance those surveys with questions about risk or the not so nice things online, but balancing that out with the positive stuff as well, the things that they really do love doing. You might use quick quizzes, so you could go and find some statistics around how many users are using Instagram, or how many snaps are sent on Snapchat every minute. Sometimes those kind of multiple choice quizzes can be quite nice to use, just to not only upskill your learners' knowledge and understanding about different platforms, but just also get an idea about whether or not they're interested in certain things or not. And then if you want to take a slightly more structured approach, and you have the time and the ability, then trying to work out where those specific gaps in their knowledge and understanding are can really affect the way in which you approach your education and your teaching as well. That's not always an easy thing to do, but there is one tool that we've developed here in the UK, where I'm based, that can be useful. It's made by the UK Safer Internet Centre, have produced a resource called Project Evolve. And I'm showing this as an example. You may be able to pick up and use this tool, but you do need to bear in mind that the platform is designed with the UK education system in mind. But the principles of the tool are really good things to take away and adopt and to think about. So on the tool, on Project Evolve, there is a wealth of free resources and activities and discussion points for learners of all different ages, from ages 3 to 18, across 8 different key areas of online safety and digital citizenship and media literacy. But the tool allows you to set up what are called knowledge maps, which is, at the face of it, looks a bit like a multiple choice quiz, but actually is an opportunity to explore potential misconceptions in your learners or gaps in their knowledge and understanding. And you can see from the example on the screen here, there's a question in the middle, and the tool generates the question and 5 possible answers. One answer is always a question mark, I don't know. One answer is always a misconception, or in inverted commas, a wrong answer. And the other 3 answers display different levels of competence. And you can actually set up the tool on this particular site to run through a particular set of questions for a particular age group. So the one that's on the screen are for year 5, which in the UK is ages 9 to 10. And I can tell by the question and the background that this is set up for online bullying, which is a whole subsection of resources on the site. And you can run this test with them. You can either do it as an individual thing where they answer it on an individual device, or you can do it as a classroom-based activity where you ask for hands up for each answer and you collect the number of responses. And then the tool actually gives you an output as to whether or not those responses are secure in their understanding, whether there are misconceptions, or whether a number of students just didn't really understand the question or didn't know what to do. And if you love pie charts, this is the site for you, because it generates a lot of them, but it gives you as a teacher an overview of the map of where the understanding lies with your learners, and it allows you then to prioritize different aspects of their learning rather than retreading old ground and teaching them something that they already know really well. Sometimes going in a slightly different way is better. You can actually identify where those gaps are and focus your teaching on that to try and address those misconceptions or those gaps. And you can then use the tool again at the end of your teaching to see if actually it's made any kind of difference. And it's really tricky in online safety because there are so many different things that can affect how a young person or a child might behave online. And many of those things are outside of our control as teachers. And it's difficult sometimes to know whether or not the education we impart has any impact on children's behavior online. Sometimes we're hopeful it does, sometimes we're proved wrong, and you find that they still go ahead and make certain mistakes or behave in certain ways that aren't healthy or aren't responsible. But this gives you a bit of a finger in the wind as to whether or not any of these things are working. So, as I mentioned, it's designed for the UK education system, but it is free to sign up, and you do have to sign up for an account in order to access these materials. But it is well worth exploring as another approach for identifying these needs. Really important as well, regardless of what you then go on to choose to teach, whether you're going to talk about cyberbullying, whether you're going to talk about how body image is affected by things that you see on social media, whether you're going to talk about persuasive design on social media and technology and games. Really important to make sure right from the off that your students know how to access support if they have any concerns or issues online. Really important to make sure they know who they turn to, because it may be that you work for a number of different classes of students. They don't see you every single day in the school week. It's important to make sure that they know that if they can't get in contact with you and ask you for help and support, that they know others in the school that they can turn to, particularly if they are learners who are brand new to the school. Maybe they are the youngest year group in the school and they've just started for the first time. They're not going to know who they can turn to. Everything is going to seem new. Everyone is going to seem new as well. I've seen lots of schools have posters that are put up in classrooms or around the school highlighting the key members of staff that can be turned to for any concerns, whether it's online or not. So that can often be a way of doing this. I've seen schools where they've had Chromebooks and iPads where they've had something pop up every time you log on just to remind students of who they can ask for help before they actually dive in and use that device in school. But making sure that they know who they can turn to for help and support is absolutely key in school. You also need to consider other ways that you can allow students to let you know when something is going on, because not all students may have the confidence to come directly to an adult in school to let them know about their issues, particularly if it's something where they feel that maybe they've broken the law or it's quite a sensitive issue to discuss. So sometimes you have to look at ways to allow anonymous reporting to take place as well. And again, schools, you and your school may already use some of these, but schools use a variety of different ways. I've seen things like they're often in the UK, we often call them bully boxes. So anonymous boxes put in every classroom where students can actually write on a piece of paper that there's an issue and just post it into the box, and the teacher will check it at the end of every school day just to see if there's anything in there, and then they can respond to it. I've seen schools use dedicated email addresses that students can email with any concerns. There are other apps and services that are out there in the educational sector that actually allow anonymous reporting in your school community so that you can pick up reports about online safety to be able to deal with them. You may not always know exactly who's involved, but you know that something's going on in school, and that can sometimes change the approach that you take as well. So all of those kind of things can be really, really useful. Of course, as much as you want to help them and support them with their issues, and as much as you will have child protection and safeguarding procedures in school to do so to help support your students, there will be times that they may want to seek help elsewhere as well. So it's really important to raise their awareness of local or national or even international helplines that can help them with issues. One of which in your country is likely to be your Safer Internet Centre, which will have a helpline that's available to members of your country. And that could be a helpline directed at you as educators. Many of the helplines in many of the countries with a Safer Internet Centre are also suitable for children or for families to contact as well. And raising awareness of that, making sure children know about that, is key too. And then one last thing that is really useful to understand is how you need to build trust in these processes and these systems as well. And I've seen this a number of times in my work with young people over the years, where I've talked to them about things, and I've run focus groups in schools, and we've talked about sensitive topics, and sexting is a classic example, where I've talked to them about it, and I've said, okay, well, who would you turn to in school if you wanted someone to help you, if you were worried about, a sexting issue gone wrong, and maybe your nude selfies are out there floating on social media. And I've had young people turn around before to me and say, actually, I wouldn't turn to anyone. I don't, no, teachers don't care. Teachers don't understand what's going on in school. I don't think teachers would keep this private. I think they'd go into the staff room and they'd let everyone know about what's happened, and then it wouldn't be a secret anymore. So sometimes for young people, it's really important to build that trust. And the best way of doing that is to explain the processes that you have in school for dealing with these kind of issues when they come to light or when they are disclosed. You don't need to go into every single detail. You don't need to suddenly whip out a complete flowchart to show them every single step in the process, but giving them a working understanding of what happens when they report or disclose something in school that's happened to them, particularly if it's something that's happened online, and then what happens next after that in order to help and support them to get that problem fixed is really valuable, because then they have a bit of an idea about what happens after that. If they just report something to you and then you forward it to whoever's in charge of child protection in the school, and then everything goes quiet for a few days or a few weeks, they're suddenly going to think that nothing's happening. And it may well be that lots of stuff is going on behind the scenes to figure out how to keep them safe. But if you don't communicate that to them as well, they're going to lose trust in the system, and they're not going to come to you for things in the future. So it's really important to think about how you can build that trust and help their general working knowledge about these processes, because it does encourage young people to come forward if they have issues. At the bottom on the slide, you can see we've got a link here to finding your Safer Internet Centre, and indeed the helpline and awareness centre and hotline that go with it as well. And just popping up on the screen here is the Kid Actions Toolkit that we produced a couple of years ago around cyberbullying. And in the guidance for educators in there is actually an activity about creating your own flowchart of a process of how to respond to in this case, a cyberbullying incident if it happens in school. But it could be useful to adapt this kind of thing and take some of the details to help explain to students what happens when they report a concern so that they know the processes that it goes through and how people are supporting them in school to deal with that issue. So that's another idea that you might find useful. And then, of course, really importantly, is your approach to what you teach and how you teach it. It's long been established, I think, that scaremongering and fearmongering doesn't work in online safety anymore. Yes, there are very real risks out there that can affect children and young people. Yes, there is very real harm that can come to young people and children. But it doesn't happen to all children. It doesn't happen to all children all the time. So it's really important to take a balanced approach in your messages. You want to protect and you want to safeguard children, but you also want to empower them to be positive and safe online as well. And sometimes the best way of doing that is adopting a very open, non-judgmental approach. Be curious, ask questions, get them to tell you about things, open up discussions. So much of things that happen online when they go wrong are often due to aspects of human behavior rather than just aspects of technology. And human behavior is a very imprecise science. And I can say that with a social sciences degree. People behave in different ways for different reasons and different contexts, and there's often no one clear right answer. And this whole idea of right and wrong becomes a lot more blurred when it comes to online behaviors. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as well as an educator. You are an adult and you use the internet in the ways that you do. Your learners are children and they use the internet in very different ways, probably, to the ways that you do. And that doesn't necessarily make it wrong, it just makes it different. Every successive generation that's come along over the last 50, 60 years, when it comes to technology, has used technology differently than the one before it. When it comes to the internet, that's no different either. I've worked in this area for about 13 years now, and even I'm completely confused sometimes about why children do some of the things that they do online, even though, I do this as a job. But it sometimes just means that it's because I'm an adult and I think differently about these things to the way that children and young people do. So taking that curious, non-judgmental approach can really help, as can making things interesting and engaging. So many online safety activities in the past have ended up with doing a worksheet or just doing a quiz or making a poster. And yes, all those things are great and they all have their place across education, not just in online safety, but there are so many other things that you can explore as well, using role play, using what if scenarios, using different approaches to discussion, are all ways of bringing this area to life. Increasingly, the use of technology in school means that you've got technology right there in the classroom that you may be able to use to facilitate this. There are online games that can teach around online safety. There are video clips that you can watch on YouTube and other platforms. There are generative AI tools that you could explore together in the classroom to understand how they work and what the pros and the cons are of those. So there are many, many things that you can build into this. It doesn't always have to be just doing a worksheet or just doing a poster. Trying to find ways of making it interactive and bouncing it off your learners' needs and their interests and their questions is really, really important. As is sometimes flipping it around as well. There may be young people in your class who are brilliant at explaining certain things about the internet or showing people how to do things on the internet to keep themselves safe. It doesn't all have to come from you. You can use them as positive role models and examples and get them to show to the class and teach the class how to do different things as well. And then finally, with educational approaches, it's really important to discuss the expectations around technology use, positive, respectful behavior online and through technology in all its forms. Setting those expectations and talking about them while you're in school can lead to those expectations being adopted outside of school, which, let's face it, is where most online safety issues occur. They don't occur with you when the students are with you in the school building, in the classroom. They happen when they're using their own technology away from school and outside of school time. So the more that you can do to build up expectations, both expectations of the school, but also shared expectations as a community about what's okay and not okay to do online is really important. And one thing that you might use in school, or a number of things you might use in school to help with this, might be that you have a set of school rules around the use of technology and the internet. And many of those will probably relate to when learners are inside of school. but indeed some of those might relate to when they're outside of school as well. So that helps set the expectations about what's acceptable. You might have things such as homeschool agreements, where you kind of agree with families what's okay and not okay as being part of the school community. And again, that can include some online safety things as well. So there's lots of different ways to try and explore this and try to establish some norms and expectations around acceptable behaviour as well. So those are educational approaches. And actually, if you want to explore more about different educational approaches, either as a primary or a secondary educator, then the core learning module on the Teacher Corner has got lots of additional information. The link is on the slide there. So I've already talked for quite a long time. I've shared some of my tips for teaching online safety, but I'd love to hear some of yours now as well. So if you are able to join in, I'd love you to head over to www.menti.com and enter the code 17098787. Or if you've got an additional device handy, like a smartphone, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen, and it will take you through to a question where you can put in one or more of the top tips that you have for teaching online safety that come from your experience. And hopefully we've got a wealth of experience of the people who are on the webinar today to share with us. So if you've got any tips that you'd like to share, do head over to Menti and start entering those. And what I will do in just a moment is I will stop sharing my slides and I'll share the Menti so that we can see some of those appear in real time so that we can look at them further. So don't worry if you didn't catch the code on my slides, because the QR code is now hopefully on your screen, as is the details at the top at menti.com, and then the code that you need to enter as well. So I would just give you a moment or two just to think about what your top tip for teaching online safety might be. So hopefully you are furiously typing away your top tips as we speak. If you missed the code or you can't see it on the screen for whatever reason, then it is also in the chat. My colleague Anna Rita has popped the web address and the code as well. So hopefully you can access it that way too. Fantastic. So I can see we've got a couple of responses that are coming in. So we'll just have a chat about those while some other people might be entering theirs. So the importance of organising discussions, as we mentioned, really important. And I can't overstate that enough. The more you can discuss online safety and online experiences, the better you can equip your students, because you're likely not to be there when things do go wrong for them online. I like this one as well, being able to share your online experiences and the online experiences of other young people, to share the fact that it hasn't just happened to one person, it may have happened to a number of us. The idea that you're not alone, there are other people who have experienced the same thing, and you can all be in it together to support each other. I like this as well. Of course, you may be able to invite people from outside to be able to come into school and explain more. Some of the work that I do here in the UK is actually going into schools and working with children and young people and teachers and parents and carers to talk about different aspects of life online and how to stay safe. So yeah, of course, you can't be expected to have expertise and expert knowledge in everything to do with online safety. It is vast. So if you need outside help, then there may well be specialists in your area or your country who can offer that. And indeed, one place to go to find some of that is your country's Safer Internet Centre has a number of different awareness raising and educational resources that are suitable for different members of your school community. So you can share those as well as a great way of helping to upskill everyone to know how to be safe online. Fantastic. We've got another one here saying using help and report details are options in detail, so people know how to get to those sources of support. I'm just going to hide the QR code so we can see this one. As we mentioned, using popular things in TV shows and movies to discuss different scenarios, to role play them or reenact them or change them, to have discussions around personal data. That's a really important one. We'll come back to that in a moment with the educators section. Establishing the rules with students as well. All really good advice. Thank you so much for sharing. There's no such thing as a bad tip in this area, I don't think. It's all about what you can do to facilitate this for your students, how you can support them, how you can educate them, how you can open up these discussions so that they can learn further. So if you still want to enter any things, the Menti is still there. Don't close the window on your device that's got Menti up, because I have got a further question for you a little bit later where you can share some tips for your fellow educators. So keep that up, but we are just going to stop sharing this screen now and just go back to my slides just to carry forward, but we'll come back to Menti in a couple of minutes. So hopefully you can see my slides again, and bear with me a second so I can just see all of you. Fantastic. So we've talked about the young people, really important to support them, but of course really important for you to understand what you can do as an educator to look after yourself online. One real important thing, regardless of whether you are new to a school or whether you've been there as a member of staff for a long time, is to understand school expectations around your use of technology and the internet. That could be in terms of your role in school. So in terms of the technology you use in your day-to-day job in teaching, it could be around the things such as laptops, the use of technology in the classroom to facilitate teaching. You need to understand what's okay there, but also things such as using your school's networking services and an intranet or a learning platform or any other tools that you use for communicating with students or for uploading work or for delivering lessons and education. So you need to understand all the expectations around those as part of your role. But it's also really important to understand the expectations in terms of other devices that may be brought in from outside into school. So depending on the school and the young people or children that you work with, if it's older ones, it may well be that they are able to bring devices in from the outside, such as smartphones or tablets or even Chromebooks or other devices. So important to recognize when it's okay to do certain things on those and not. But of course, you as an adult likely have your own smartphone. So it's important to understand expectations in your school about when that can and can't be used and in what ways. Other types of devices fall into this as well, though. So things like USB memory sticks and portable hard drives, another type of technology that can be brought to and from school. Sometimes ones that are your own personal ones too. Really important to understand the expectations around those. Can you bring in a USB memory stick from home and stick it into a computer and run something or fire up a presentation? Is that okay or is that not okay? Really important to understand the expectations around that, both from a privacy and data protection perspective and a cybersecurity perspective. So understanding school expectations is important, but also in terms of your personal life, which is your personal life, you do need to understand that as a teacher, as a professional, your school may have certain expectations or codes of conduct around you as a professional teacher. So there may be certain standards that you have to adhere to. They may mention behavior that reflects online. They may not. Different standards vary from country to country, but it really is important to have an overview and be aware of that in terms of your the expectations around you as a professional. One way to help you with that is to become familiar with the policies and procedures in your school. So online safety itself may have its own policy. In some schools it does, in some schools it doesn't, but it forms part of child protection and safeguarding. So you need to be very familiar with those policies and the procedures around those. But of course, online safety very much spills out into other areas of education as well. So that you are likely to have a policy in your school around tackling bullying, of which online bullying will be a part of. It may well be featured in policies around things such as personal and social and emotional development. It may feature in policies around teaching of more sensitive topics such as relationships and sex education or aspects of health education as well. So it's really important to be familiar with where online safety and aspects of online safety fit in your policies. You don't need to know every single word of policies, of course, that's not really how policies work, but having a working knowledge of that is important to understand, as is making sure you know what to do if a young person discloses an online safety issue to you. Who do you report it to? How do you record this or log this in some way? What information do you need to provide? How do you work to support that young person after you've made a report? Is there an expectation that you act as a point of contact for them if they have any questions? Are there other means that you can do to offer up some form of pastoral care to them? So understanding those policies is really important as well. And then the last two are more specifically for you as an individual, but also as a teacher working in school. One is to think very carefully about your reputation online. Yes, you are an individual who is likely using the internet. You may be on different social media platforms. You may have created content that's out there online, on YouTube and others. And of course, that builds up your own reputation as an individual. But you are a member of staff at your school, and therefore your reputation can potentially impact on the school's reputation too. Sometimes it's tricky to separate one out from the other, particularly when a teacher online may be expressing certain views or opinions that may not reflect on those shared by their school. So you need to take steps to manage this and to build this in the right kind of way. And the simplest step in many cases is to find out what's publicly out there about you online to start with. Easiest way to do that is to Google yourself or search for yourself in different search engines, go to different social media platforms and type in your username or your name and see if you can find details about your account. See if you can get a view of those accounts the way any other online user may be able to find that online. Because, of course, other people may go looking for you online too. It could be your students themselves who are curious about you and want to know more about you. It could be parents or carers. It could be fellow colleagues. It could be anyone in your school community might go searching for you online and want to learn more about you. Um, and by searching for yourself, you get an idea about the kind of things that they're going to come across. So whether or not those are going to create a positive first impression, whether those things that they might be able to find in the Google search results related to your name maybe share too much personal information about you or too many details, and whether there's anything there that might cause confusion or cause some headaches. You have to bear in mind, of course, that, depending on your name, you may share that with the name of a famous public figure or a celebrity or an influencer. And of course, then if you search for that name online, you're very unlikely to find anything about you. It's going to be about that more famous person. But it's important to recognize that people with the same name can pop up then if someone's searching, and that can, distort reputations or confuse things further. It's definitely well worth searching for your name on social media platforms, even if you don't have an account on there, because there have been many cases in many countries in the past of young people who have gone and created a false account about a teacher on social media so they can put up embarrassing pictures or they can say things that aren't true on there about the teacher in order to damage their reputation in some way. Often that's done by students as a prank, but it's important to be aware about what might be out there about you, and searching for yourself is the way to do that. Once you've found that, it's about promoting the positive. It's about making sure that those first impressions that people do have of you are positive first impressions, highlighting your skills, your passions, your interests, your hobbies, what makes you you. It's absolutely fine to have a voice online to express yourself, but you want that to be promoting the positive and the best side of yourself rather than something that might be misconstrued or seen as misleading. And one of the ways to do that is to use privacy settings to manage what friends and followers, but other users on a particular app or social media platform can see about you. Privacy settings are there to be able to distinguish between things that are going to be out there in the public and things that are kept as a private conversation. At the end of the day, remember, private is never truly 100% private online. Even if you have a private discussion on WhatsApp with some friends or colleagues, it's very easy for anyone, if they wanted to take a screenshot of a conversation or part of a conversation or of a photo and put that somewhere else on social media online that is more public and can be seen by more people. And that's just a point there at the bottom too, is that, friends and family share things, they're also online. It's great to share things with our friends and family, but they may not always have their privacy settings locked down in the way that you do as a professional working in a school. So you need to keep that in mind, as that sometimes through their channels and their platforms, they sometimes share details about you a bit more openly and to a wider audience. It's not to say don't trust your friends or don't trust your family, but it is a consideration to keep in mind. So keeping on top of this online reputation and really pushing the positive wherever you can be really useful as well. And search engine results rely on relevance and recency. So how recent something was. So if you're worried that the Google search results about you are a bit stale or don't show some of your best achievements recently, do more to promote those online. If you're someone that loves to actively fundraise for charities and things you care about, do more of that because it's going to generate more search engine results that are going to appear at the top of the list and move some of those less relevant things down the list where people usually don't get that far to look. So the more you can do to promote the positive, the better. And of course, it's about keeping yourself updated and upskilled too. So one way is the Teacher Corner, as I mentioned, which is being added to on a monthly basis with new topics. But the other way is to check out the BIK Resource Gallery on the Better Internet for Kids portal, which has got a wealth of resources from the network of safer internet centres that can be used either for you as a teacher or with your students, or be shared with parents and carers, depending on their nature. And that's a great place to find resources that aren't just in English, because you can search for different ages and search for different languages and find a wealth of materials there. So well worth checking out. Another way to ensure that you stay up to date is you can head over to European Schoolnet Academy and check out the various courses that are available, many of which are all about exploring technology and its role in education. And from time to time, we run online safety courses as well, or what we call MOOCs, massive open online courses. And in fact, earlier this year, we did run one from March to April. It was titled An Evolving Online Safety Landscape. And it was all about how to approach online safety education with the children and young people that you work with. It was about understanding the BIK Plus, or Better Internet for Kids Plus strategy adopted by the European Commission, about promoting and protecting and empowering youth online. And it also had a large amount of content around understanding the Digital Services Act, I remembered it that time, and the impact that it has on child safety and well-being online as well, and sort of getting to grips with that too. So although the course was run between March and April and has now finished in terms of being able to get a certificate for completing it, all the materials are still there and you can still enroll at any time you like in order to explore all of those course materials. And actually throughout the course, throughout the different units, are various video clips of young people from across Europe expressing their views and opinions around life online. So it gives you a bit of an insight into that as well. And then finally, really important to look for other professional development opportunities within your school setting. So there may be various courses or qualifications that can be offered to you to help you build up your knowledge and understanding in this area. So reaching out to your line manager or to part of your leadership team in school to explore those and find what's available is a great way to go if you have a specific interest in this area. So those are a few tips from me for educators. I'd love to hear some tips from you as well. So if you'd like to head back over to the Menti, I will pop the second question up, which will give you the opportunity to share any top tips you have for other educators who are on this webinar about how to manage their reputation or how to approach online safety in the best possible way. Over to you again. So there we go. All the details for the Menti are back up on the screen as well as the live view. And we'll take some suggestions in just a moment. Okay, brownie points for the first one then. So the first response that we've had, thank you, says stay updated as much as possible with trainings or webinars like this one. Thank you very much, much appreciated. Getting involved, really important, absolutely. And likewise, these webinars are obviously being provided by ourselves as part of the Better Internet for Kids platform, but your Safer Internet Centre in your country may well run webinars on different topics and different aspects, or may offer other training materials that you can make use of as well. So it's well worth having an explore of what they have to offer too. I I like the third suggestion that's popped up. I think it's one that we can all do as colleagues, is find ways of cooperating more, definitely. So maybe you're sat here and you are really familiar with how to manage your online reputation, but you might be aware that there are some new colleagues to your school, or even some long-standing colleagues who maybe aren't so familiar with some of these ideas and how to do it. And it may be that you can share your knowledge and expertise with them in order to help them manage their reputation or be safer online too. Oh, lots of ones coming in. Sorry, I'm just going to close the QR code so we can see them. Organise projects about safety and present those to parents at parents' meetings. And indeed, that may be of benefit to staff as well. Fantastic. Exploring opportunities and challenges yourselves. So getting to grips with what you find difficult online. Brilliant. Involving students actively, showcasing real life and incidents around online identity. Brilliant. Sometimes you can flip that learning. You get students to present to staff and teach staff about things. That can be very effective as well. Discussing things with students, sharing experiences, inviting experts, training and workshops, and most importantly, sharing knowledge. And that's one of the great things I think about the internet as well, is that it makes it very easy to share things with fellow teachers, be it on X, on Facebook groups, or other places as well. So loads of great ways that you can share things. Fantastic. Thank you for those suggestions. Bear with me a second. We're just going to go back to the slide for the last of our sections, which is also really important as well. It's how we can support families too. So working with families is a big part of your role in school. They are fundamentally an important part of your school community. And as I mentioned earlier, online safety incidents and when things go wrong rarely happen when children are in school with you. It happens when they are at home or using technology elsewhere. And that's where families and family involvement is absolutely key. So in the same way that we want to encourage discussion in school to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of online safety and online experience, we need to encourage families to have those discussions as well. That could be providing useful resources, maybe from your Safer Internet Centre. It could be sharing that big question you've been discussing in school all week so that they can repeat the discussion at home with their children and reiterate some of the messages. It could be giving out little bits of information now and again to help facilitate that as well. One very powerful way sometimes is providing conversation starters, ways that they can open up that discussion or that conversation, a key question that they could ask their children to get the ball rolling. And communication is a really important aspect around all of this as well, because it's all about how you communicate with the parents and carers and families in your community. Little and often works best. You don't want to bombard people with far too much information, a bit like I'm doing in this webinar. You want to break it down to bite-sized chunks so that they can take it on board, that they can reflect on it, and they can have those discussions with their children. But you don't want to try and draw them to you. Sometimes it's easiest to go where they are. Use the existing channels that you already use to communicate with parents and find ways of putting online safety messages into those. It could be something in the weekly or monthly newsletter, just a quick tip about something online about how to stay safe. Could be using your social media channels you may have as a school, posting an online safety tip or some advice or a link to a useful resource once a week, just so it kind of keeps it on their radar. It could be using things like SMS to communicate with parents or groups of parents directly, emails that are sent out, and indeed information that you provide on your school website can all be used as a hub to draw parents back to that information time and time again. Many schools may have an online safety page on their website where they will list lots of really useful resources that parents can use and explore. It's also about leveraging those key moments. The start of the school year is one, but it could also be a tech rollout in your school. Maybe you're just about to launch iPads for all the students. That's a great opportunity to talk about online safety and expectations, particularly if those iPads or those Chromebooks or whatever they might be aren't staying in school. Maybe they're going to home and to school and back again, and there's the opportunity for misuse or for online safety issues to arise there. That's a great opportunity to talk about expectations and give advice. And of course, other key moments in the school year. So things like Cybersecurity Month, which falls in October. So next month is a great opportunity to talk about being cyber secure. And Safer Internet Day in February is also a great moment to talk about these things too. You may also want to find out what your parents and carers think in school. So you may use, as you do with students, surveys, questionnaires, and other ways of gauging their views and their opinions, highlighting what their needs might be in this area and what they want to learn about as well. It's also about empowering them to be preventative. Yes, you will hear about the issues that happen at home online when something goes wrong, because then parents come to tell you about it, but the more you can do to promote preventative strategies, the better. So one way is to establish family agreements. You can share with families the whole idea of coming up with agreed rules around acceptable use in the same way that you do in school. how can they replicate that process at home? You can empower parents to understand technical solutions such as parental controls, filtering, privacy tools, and other things that they can use to protect their children and teach their children how to use as well in some regards. You can help them be aware of age requirements around social media or around things such as pornographic content or other age restricted content online and the rationale for why those age restrictions exist so they can help explain those to their children too. And similarly, as I mentioned earlier, you can set expectations about what is responsible use. And just in the way that we want to empower our learners to know how to get help if they need it, we want to empower families as well. So make sure they have some kind of working knowledge of your school procedures with dealing with incidents. Make sure they clearly know who to go to in school if they have a concern about their child's online experiences. And make sure you can give them some information and advice about how to report this on social media platforms and games and other apps so that they can report it to those providers as well to get help and support rather than just funneling any concerns straight through to the school. And indeed, it may be signposting to expert support and advice as well. National and local helplines, the helpline for your Safer Internet Centre falls into this category too. And with that in mind, here's just some quick links in the slides for finding your National Safer Internet Centre again, and to get back to the BIK Resource Gallery. And again, you could signpost them to useful resources in their language on the Resource Gallery too. So lots of places that you can signpost to. That brings us very nicely almost to the end, but just a quick coming soon to be aware of is that we are planning, as I mentioned right at the start of the webinar, we're planning to launch a BIK Parent Corner that's going to mirror some of the content that's currently on the Teacher Corner. It's going to have 3 core modules, as you can see on the left, and it's going to launch with just one of those initially. And those are quite different to the core modules that you see on the Teacher Corner, but the deep dives are going to cover a number of the same risks and areas that the Teacher Corner currently does. So that will be launching hopefully sometime next month, and we will continue to build on the deep dives month by month, but that should hopefully provide another source of information. I'm afraid that is going to be provided in English only, but again, you may be able to make use of technology and translation tools to help make that accessible to your parents and carers as well. One final thing, very, very quickly, is that just to make you aware again about our BIK Teacher voice panel. We talk about this at the end of every webinar. If you're interested in having a more active voice in this area around online safety, and you want to talk about not only your learners' experiences, but consider whole school approaches and even national approaches to online safety and what we can all do to make things better and safer for everyone online, children included, then we'd love to hear from you. There's a link on this slide in order to sign up and express an interest in the teacher panel. So if you've got a real interest in this area, we'd love to hear your thoughts and hear from your experience as well. And that brings us to the end. I appreciate a lot of information in a short space of time, some things that you may very well already be familiar with, but hopefully you've been able to take a couple of things away from that you may be able to put in practice for the start of this new school year. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this webinar today. If you have any questions, please do feel free to type them into the chat and I'll hang on for a couple of moments. Otherwise, my email address is on the screen here as well, so please do feel free to reach out to me. Thanks again. Thanks so much for attending, and I wish you a very productive and positive and safe school year. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Gareth. Let's just give our audience a few moments to collect their thoughts and see if they have any questions that they would like to type in. In the meantime, I'm going to take the opportunity to thank you, Gareth, very much for this excellent webinar. I'm sure our teachers and educators now have a lot of tools, ideas, and inspiration to get back to school and be as ready as ever and start a wonderful new school year, which is what we hope for everyone. And yes, feel free to post any questions here in the chat, or you have Gareth's contact details and we can be in touch. Thank you very much again, really, to everyone for participating, for joining us in this afternoon, which is a little bit gloomy here in Brussels in Belgium. And yes, I wish everyone a wonderful evening.